This is Amaka. Before anyone learned she was kind, before anyone discovered she was brilliant, they saw only one thing, which was her big forehead. And because of that, they made her life a living nightmare. But those same people would one day regret every cruel word they said to her. This is Amaka's story. In the busy town of Ikorodu, there was a secondary school called Federal Government College, Ikorodu. Every morning, students flooded through the gates with gossip, laughter, and excitement. But among them walked a girl who always kept her head down. Her name was Amaka. Amaka had a noticeably large forehead. It was the first thing people saw before they noticed her eyes, her smile, or her kindness. And because students can sometimes be cruel, they turned it into a joke. Fivehead is coming! Make way! Wrong way, forehead! A forehead can receive satellite signals. The corridor erupted with laughter anytime she passed. Amaka would force a smile, pretending it did not hurt, but inside, every word felt like a stone hitting her chest. As she entered her classroom, whispers followed her from desk to desk. Some students covered their mouths while laughing, while others stared openly. Amaka sat alone, wishing she could just disappear into the wall. During one morning lesson, the teacher asked a question. Amaka knew the answer immediately because she was one of the brightest pupils in school, so she slowly raised her hands up. But before she could say the answer, a boy muttered loudly, "Her forehead raised first." The whole class erupted into laughter again. Amaka lowered her hand and looked down at her desk. Once again, she chose silence over embarrassment. During break time, while other students gathered in groups, sharing snacks, taking pictures, and laughing together, Amaka would sit alone under the mango tree. Her lunch would often remain untouched because she was so lost in her thoughts. She watched her classmates live the teenage life she wished she had. She wanted friends. She wanted acceptance. She wanted people to see her as more than just the girl with the big forehead. The walk home was always the hardest part of her day. Without the noise of the school around her, the painful words replayed louder in her mind. Fivehead, runway, alien. She had heard those words so many times that they started feeling like the truth. Amaka began to question herself and wonder if something was really wrong with her. That evening, she stood in front of a small mirror hanging on the wall. She pulled her hair forward, sideways, then into bangs. Nothing seemed to work. Nothing seemed to hide her forehead completely. Tears gathered in her eyes. Why can't I just be normal? She whispered to herself. Her mother entered quietly and saw her crying. My daughter, what happened? Amaka shook her head. Nothing. But a mother's heart notices what words try to hide. Her mother then sat beside her on the bed. Mom, people are laughing at my forehead. Amaka finally confessed. Her mother gently touched her face and said, listen to me carefully, my daughter. A person's value is not measured by the size of their forehead, nose, or eyes. But everyone says I'm ugly, Amaka told her mom. Everyone is not always right, her mom comforted her. That did nothing to change Amaka's mind, as the next day, Amaka spent almost an hour styling her hair to cover her forehead. When she arrived at school, a girl immediately said, see how she's hiding it today. Another replied, even the hair is tired. Amaka then realized something painful. No hairstyle could stop people determined to mock her. A few days later, something unexpected happened. During lunch break, the most popular girl in their class, Sonia, stood up excitedly and announced that she would be celebrating her birthday later that weekend. Everyone in SS2 is invited. The class cheered. For the first time in months, Amaka felt a spark of hope. Maybe this was finally a chance to be part of everyone else. Maybe this was the beginning of something good. She carefully chose her best dress. She saved money to buy a small birthday gift. She practiced smiling in front of the mirror. And she said to herself, tonight will be different, I'm sure of that. When Amaka arrived at the party, the atmosphere was beautiful. There were colorful balloons, music playing loudly, delicious food, and teenagers dancing and taking pictures together. For a brief moment, Amaka forgot about all the pain she had been carrying. She stood quietly at the edge of the crowd, feeling both nervous and excited. She truly believed that this might become one of her happiest moments. A little while later, Sonia called everyone together for a group photo. Excited voices filled the room as students rushed to stand beside one another. Amaka slowly joined the second row, hoping to finally be part of the group. But just as the photographer was about to take the picture, one boy suddenly shouted, "Amaka, move back, Joe. Your forehead is taking half of the picture." For a brief second, the entire room fell silent. Then almost everyone burst into loud laughter. Amaka could feel her face becoming hot with embarrassment. Her hands began to tremble. She looked around the room, hoping that at least one person would tell the others to stop, but no one did. Even some students who she thought were kind were laughing, and in that moment she felt smaller than she had ever felt before. It wasn't just the joke that hurt, it was the fact that no one cared enough to defend her. Without saying a single word, she dropped the gift and ran out of the party. The music continued behind her as if nothing had happened, and that was what broke her heart the most. Her pain had become someone else's source of entertainment. As Amaka walked home, light rain began to fall. She didn't bother looking for shelter, she simply kept walking while tears rolled down her face. Before long, she reached a small bus stop and sat quietly on the bench. Looking up at the dark sky, she whispered through her tears, "Why was I born like this?" It was one of the loneliest moments of her life. The next school day, Amaka avoided everyone. Instead of joining her classmates during break, she quietly sat behind the school library where she knew no one would disturb her. A few moments later, a quiet boy named Today walked over and sat beside her. He didn't laugh. He didn't stare at her forehead. He didn't ask unnecessary questions. He simply sat beside her in silence. Somehow, that simple act of kindness meant more than words ever could. After sitting for a while, Tunde finally spoke. "I heard what happened at the party," he said softly. Amaka sighed and looked away. "Everyone heard," she replied. Tunde nodded. "When I was younger, people laughed at me because I stammered," he said. "The bullying became so bad that I stopped talking for almost a year." Amaka turned and looked at him in surprise. "You too?" she said quietly. Tunde smiled gently and said, "Yes, different insults but the same pain." And for the first time in a very long while, Amaka felt like someone truly understood her. From that day onward, something began to change in Amaka's life. During lunch breaks, she and Tude would sit at the library talking about school, their dreams, and the things they loved. As they spent more time together, Tunde discovered that Amaka had a great talent for drawing and storytelling. Her notebooks were filled with beautiful sketches of villages, families, children, and imaginary worlds. Looking through one of her sketchbooks, Tunde smiled and said, "Amaka, you are incredibly talented." Amaka simply shrugged. "Talent doesn't change my face," she replied. Tunde then looked at her gently and said, "Maybe your face was never the problem." A few weeks later, the principal made an announcement during assembly. The state government was organizing an art and storytelling competition for secondary school students. The theme was Beauty Beyond Appearance. Immediately Tunde heard those words, he turned to Amaka and said, "Amaka, this competition was made just for you." Amaka gave a small bitter laugh. "How can I stand on a stage when hundreds of people are looking at my forehead?" she asked. Tunde smiled and he said, "That's exactly why you should." That night, after thinking about it for a very long time, Amaka sat quietly in her room with sheets of papers, pencils, and paints spread across her desk. She poured every painful memory into her artwork. She drew a young girl with a large forehead standing confidently in the middle of a crowd. But unlike before, the girl wasn't hiding it. Her head was held high, and above it shone a beautiful golden crown. Every line she drew represented a painful experience she had survived, and every color represented the hope she was slowly finding again. Competition day finally arrived. Students from different schools filled the large hall, each carrying their own artwork and stories. As Amaka waited at dawn, her hands shook with nervousness. When the judges stopped at her table, they studied her artwork for several moments without saying a word. Finally, one of them looked at her and asked, "What inspired this piece?" Amaka took a deep breath before finally replying, "My life." Later that afternoon, finalists were invited onto the stage to explain the meaning behind their work. As Amaka walked towards the microphone, she could feel hundreds of eyes watching her. Fear tried to silence her once again, but then she remembered every insult, every lonely lunch break, every tear she had cried in front of her bedroom mirror. Taking one deep breath, she began to speak. People often decide someone's value within a few seconds of seeing them, she began. Many people laughed at my forehead before they ever learned my name. They judged my appearance before they discovered my heart. The entire hall became silent. She continued. But the pain I experienced taught me something I never expected. When you spend your life hiding a part of yourself, you also hide the gifts that God placed inside you. Not a single person interrupted her. As Amaka finished speaking, many people in the audience could no longer hide their emotions. Some teachers quietly wiped tears from their eyes. Students who had been chatting earlier now listened with complete attention and tears in their eyes. The judges finally returned to announce the results. Third place was announced, then second place. Amaka lowered her head, convinced she had not won. Suddenly, the chief judge smiled and said, "First place goes to Amaka Okafor of FGC Ikorodu." For a few seconds, Amaka couldn't believe what she had just heard. Then the audience stood to their feet, clapping louder than before. As Amaka walked across the stage to receive her trophy and certificate, she noticed something she had never experienced before. Once again, people were looking at her. But this time, they weren't laughing, they were applauding. And for the first time in years, she felt truly seen. News of Amaka's victory spread throughout the school within days. Her artwork was displayed proudly inside the principal's office. Teachers congratulated her in the hallways. Students gathered around to admire the drawing that had touched so many hearts. The same school that once mocked her had now begun celebrating her. Not long afterwards, a group of girls approached Amaka during lunch break. They looked uncomfortable and struggled to find the right words. Finally, one of them spoke. "Amaka, we are really sorry." Another added, "We never realized how much we hurt you." Amaka listened quietly. Their apology could never erase the pain she had endured. But hearing those words helped her begin to heal. Later that day, Sonia also came to apologize. Looking ashamed, she admitted, "I should have stopped them at my birthday party. I cared more about everyone laughing than I cared about your feelings." Amaka looked at her gently before replying. Sometimes silence hurts just as much as cruelty. Sonia lowered her head. She knew Amaka was right. That evening, sitting together during closing time under the tree, Tunde asked, "Do you still hate them?" Amaka thought quietly for a moment before answering. "I was angry for a very long time," she admitted. But carrying that anger became heavier than carrying the insults. Tunde smiled. "So you've forgiven them?" Amaka nodded. "I forgive them for my own peace, not because what they did was acceptable." Several months passed and graduation day finally arrived. As Amaka stood in front of her bedroom mirror one last time, she slowly tied her hair back. For the first time in years, she made no attempt to hide her forehead. She smiled at her reflection. She had finally accepted herself exactly as she was.
As she walked confidently across the school compound, many students greeted her with warm smiles. Some of the people who once laughed at her now admired her confidence. But the greatest change hadn't happened in them, it had happened inside Amaka. She no longer needed anyone's approval to know her worth.
During the graduation ceremony, Amaka was invited to address the graduating class. Looking around at the students, she smiled and said, "When I was younger, I believed my forehead was a curse because people laughed at it every single day. But I eventually realized that my appearance was never my greatest problem. The real problem was allowing other people's opinions to decide how I saw myself." She continued, "Never laugh at someone because of a physical feature they didn't choose. A person's forehead, nose, height, skin color, or body shape does not determine their value. Rather, kindness, character, courage, and compassion are what truly makes someone beautiful." The hall remained completely silent as everyone reflected on her words. As Amaka stood proudly, holding a trophy with her hair tied back, she no longer saw her forehead as something to hide. It had become a reminder of how far she had come. The future people once used to break her confidence had become part of the story that inspired many others. And from that day forward, Amaka never again allowed anyone's opinion to define her worth. And as we come to the end of Amaka's story, always remember to never judge or mock someone because of their appearance. Physical features do not define a person's beauty, intelligence, talent, or value. The very thing people laugh at today may become the reason that person inspires the world tomorrow. Thanks for watching. I hope you learned a very great lesson from Amaka's story. If you've stayed to the end of this video, thank you so much. I love you. Please don't forget to like, comment, and follow this page for more interesting stories.